I'm writing this story just hours after the most insane moment of my entire life. I know that may seem a bit dramatic, but at the moment, it was absolutely crazy. My family and I had just arrived at our campsite for the week, and I'm on eggshells looking over my shoulder every 2 seconds, even though deep down, I'm sure I'm alright. So, bear with me as I try to do the best I can to tell this story, since this is the first time I'm recalling it since the incident. Late last night, me and my family left our house to embark on our 1-week camping adventure. Our 2 kids were so excited to finally be able to join me and my wife on one of our camping adventures. She and I have gone on all sorts of adventures over the years, but we wanted to wait until our kids were just a little bit older before involving them. Finally, that time had come for the kids to join us, and we set out on our 7-hour drive a little after midnight. After the initial excitement of leaving, and the musical concert inside my truck was over, everyone fell asleep in the truck, except for me, which is fine. It gave me a chance to listen to one of my audiobooks that I'd been neglecting for some time. I was surprised when we were close to our destination, and I realized that my family had mostly been asleep for the entire drive. They would have brief moments of waking up and asking where we were, but they mostly stayed out cold for the entire trip. About 30 minutes until we reached the campsite, I got the dreaded flat tire that no driver wants to get, especially when you're on vacation. I was lucky to have my spare tire, so this was no more than an inconvenience, but I was still annoyed. I remember being scared as I briefly lost control of the car and slid to the side of the road before I regained control. Somehow, my family was still asleep. I quietly got out of the truck and unburied the spare tire underneath all of our luggage. While I was preparing to fix the tire, I started to wonder what I hit. I got the flat tire seemingly out of nowhere. Sure, that can happen, but I was suspicious for some reason. I got the damaged tire off and replaced it with the spare. I was just finishing up changing the tire when I heard the light sound of someone clearing their throat. It sounded like my wife, but when I turned around, I was greeted by a small woman with dreadlocks and a tattoo of a rose on the middle of her neck. I said hello in a tentative and confused voice. The woman smiled, and she said in a delicate voice, "Hi, I'm Summer. You look like you could use some help." I smiled and said, "Thank you, Summer, but I think I'm okay." I was trying to be polite, and I wasn't feeling great about the entire situation. This woman kept looking to the side of the road, like she was communicating with someone, but whenever I would look over there, I didn't see anything. She just kept on insisting on helping, never changing her nice and polite voice, and I just kept saying, "No thank you." Eventually, I started to pack up the tools and get myself ready to hit the road. That's when the woman said, "I think you really need my help." Then her voice changed instantly. It wasn't this polite and delicate little voice anymore. In an angry and an almost vicious voice, she said, "Let me help you." I was not having any of this anymore. I turned to the woman, and in a mean voice I said to her, "Okay, lady, you need to leave. I have my family in the car, and I'm not in the mood for any of this. If you don't leave, I'm going to call the police." I thought that my threat might do the trick, but instead she just started to laugh. I had enough, and I just turned around while she was laughing. I opened the driver's side door and put my keys in the cup holder, so all I had to do was push to start when I entered the truck. When I turned back around to grab the lug wrench, which is that cross-shaped wrench if you don't know what I'm talking about, I turned around to the woman in mid-swing with the lug wrench, attempting to strike me in the head. I was able to catch the blow with my hand, and I kicked the woman onto the ground. She grunted and then ran to the side of the road, that same side that she had kept looking at earlier. Without wasting any time, I got in the truck and sped off as fast as I could, constantly checking my mirror for any sign of this woman or any other kind of car following me. And thankfully, the last 30 minutes of my drive went by with no issues. I told my wife when she woke up, and she was angry that I didn't call the police right away. She called as soon as we got to the campsite and gave the police the entire description of the woman. She told the police the name that she gave, the tattoo, and exactly on the road where she confronted me. I can't help but feel like that woman is going to find me and my family at this campsite. She clearly saw that I had camping gear in my truck when she confronted me. I didn't realize it until later, but now I can't help but think that she was somehow responsible for causing the flat tire, but I have no evidence to back that theory up. I'm going to try and enjoy my trip, but I wanted to get this story out while all the details were still clear in my head. Now I can't stop wondering what it is that she wanted. Did she want my truck with the spare tire? Did she just want to rob me? Or was it something much worse? I hope I never see that woman with the rose tattoo again. This is a freaky story that happened to me a few years back. Back when my wife was still my girlfriend, we decided to take an impromptu camping trip. I never camped much, other than a few times with a friend of mine. But my girlfriend used to camp all the time with her family when she was younger, and she really wanted to camp again. She thought it would be a great chance for her and I to spend some time together, away from all the noise of the city she and I lived in at the time. She went all out and bought all this awesome camping stuff. Among those items was a nice new tent. It was a bigger tent, especially for 2 people, but I didn't mind. More room was always okay with me since I was a bigger guy at the time of the story. The one thing I liked about this tent, which I found out later most tents have, was that it had this window thing on it so I could see outside the tent at night. I knew it was going to be dark, but just the ability to be able to see and then have the light shine in on us in the morning was a comforting thought for me. We arrived at this desolate location in the afternoon. We were only staying 2 nights, so we wanted to make the best of the trip. The first afternoon we didn't do much, just chilled, set up the tent, and went to bed fairly early. I loved my little window in the tent. I was able to stare out of it while I was laying in my sleeping bag, and because of where the tent was located, I was able to see the night sky, and it was so beautiful. Just as I expected, the light blasted through the window in the morning, and it was almost like waking up in my own bed. We got out of bed early and made the most of the day. We went fishing, hiking, and still was able to spend a considerable amount of time just laying around relaxing, reading, and enjoying the sunshine. We were on track to have another early night, and I was all right with that. Neither one of us had ever been a night owl, and we were beat from everything that we did earlier in the day. We got all cozy in the tent and made sure I propped my window screen open. While I was starting to drift off, I thought I noticed something outside the tent. It looked like movement, but I didn't know if I had just dozed off for a second or if I'd really saw something. I sat up, and before I could get a good look, my girlfriend said, "Did you see that too?" I told her I thought I saw something, but I wasn't sure. We both sat up and stared out of our little tent window. It just looked like a peaceful night. Then my girlfriend gasped. It sounded like the air had been sucked out of her. To this day, I still have never seen that expression she had in that moment. Sitting on a tree branch about 30 or 40 feet away was a person. They were wearing one of those weird fake president masks. While sitting in the tree, they were kicking their feet back and forth like a child on a swing would do. We both just sat there like sitting ducks. I was terrified because we hadn't seen one other person the entire time we were at the campsite, and now all of a sudden this creep with a mask was so close to us. I felt like crying, but I was trying to be brave since my girlfriend was in tears. I know the person wasn't directly doing anything to us, but the unsettling nature of the situation made us both so uncomfortable. We watched the guy for probably like 5 minutes, just sitting in the tree, and then he finally jumped down. The person still never approached the tent, but that feeling that they were going to rush us at any second never went away. It felt like forever that this person just paced around, and then finally, the person just stopped. He didn't move forward, he didn't sway, he just stood still, like a statue. A couple of minutes later, the person turned around, and now they were facing the tent head on. We could hear them laughing under the mask, and the person started to wave right at us. Even with the mask on, it felt like the person was staring right at me. And the wave wasn't just a subtle little wave. The person was erratically moving their hand back and forth like they were trying to get their hand to fall off. Then, the person just stopped waving abruptly, and in a muffled voice, that we could barely hear from under the mask, we could hear the guy yell, "Bye, guys." And then he literally ran off at full speed into the woods. We sat there and continued staring out the window all night long. We both may have dozed off at different points, but we mostly stayed awake for the entire night. The guy in the mask never came back, and there was no evidence of where he came from. That was the most disturbing part. Whoever this was, he knew we were there. We had no idea how long he'd been in that tree. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. I guess all things considered, we're lucky since nothing technically happened to us. Even though we were physically unharmed, mentally this left us messed up for a while, and we were still thinking about it to this day. We have gone camping several times since that night, but from now on, we'll only stay in a cabin with doors that we can lock. I'll try to tell you what happened to me and my wife, Lisa, a few months ago to the best of my ability. We decided to go on a camping trip. You know, enjoy nature, get away from the hustle and bustle of city life. We had been looking forward to this break for a long time. Our first day out in the woods was amazing. The weather was perfect, and we spent the day hiking and exploring. When the sun began to set, we found a nice secluded spot to set up our tent. As the evening went on, we made a campfire and cooked dinner over it. Everything felt so peaceful. However, as we settled into the tent for the night, we started hearing odd noises. I know that's vague, but that's the only way I can describe it. Basically, it just didn't sound like your typical sounds of nature. I brushed it off initially thinking it was probably just some wildlife that I'd never heard of before. But then, there were giggles. Distinct, almost childlike giggles. Lisa and I exchanged nervous glances, and I couldn't shake that feeling that something was just off. Mustering up some courage, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, with the flashlight in my hand. There was nothing. Nothing but the moon shining onto our campsite, and the beam of light from my flashlight. In the light from the flashlight, I noticed sticks scattered across the ground, in an odd pattern that seemed almost deliberate. And then I saw stacks of rocks, stacked all around the tent, which I know for a fact wasn't there when we made our camp. And despite the uneasiness, we tried to get some sleep, but just as we were about to drift off, a silhouette of a woman appeared against our tent, lit up by the moonlight. My heart pounded in my chest as I quickly grabbed my flashlight again and rushed outside. But again, there was nothing. We knew we saw something there. The shadow wasn't a tree or a bush, and it was clearly the silhouette of a person. The giggles we had heard all night had now turned into an unnerving cackle. The horrible laughter could be heard echoing all around us in almost every direction. At this point, we decided it was best to leave. We packed our essentials in a hurry. The laughter was growing louder in our ears. It felt like it was almost following us. We moved as quickly as we could through the dark forest. The car keys were clutched tightly in my hands. We finally reached the car, and without a word, I unlocked it and we both scrambled inside, pretty much out of breath. I started the engine and we were moving. I wasted no time and got out of there as fast as I could. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and I froze. There was an old woman standing where the car had just been seconds ago. She was waving at us, and we could still hear the laughter. I pressed the gas pedal hard, and we sped away, leaving the haunting image and the unnerving cackles behind. We haven't gone camping since, and I doubt we ever will again. Every time I close my eyes, I can still see that old woman's face in the mirror and hear that horrible laughter. I will never, ever forget that horrible, horrible laughter.